Okay, so here I am again. Thank you to all of you who have subscribed, especially on the therapy techniques that I have mentioned already. I hope all of you are using them. It's when you use these things that they're really useful. So now I'm starting a new series about commentaries on research and new topics in psychology and psychiatry. So the first thing I'm going to talk about today is voice hearing, which is a very interesting concept. It's especially interesting because we all hear voices. We all hear voices. It's just that we think of them as thoughts. And it's just that most of us, we feel that these are very internal voices. We don't really hear them. But how can we really know the experience of another person? This is partly what researchers in Bergen, Norway, where I come from, have studied. They advertised in the newspapers for people who hear voices, and they got a lot of reply. And they found out that 5% of the population hear voices on a daily basis. And when they asked these people if they were stressed about their voices, they discovered that 80% of those who hear voices are not stressed about it at all. Only 1% of the population in general is stressed about hearing their voices. And it's quite logical that when people come to psychiatrists and say that they hear voices, since the psychiatrist probably has never heard voices and never had a relaxed attitude towards voices, they will medicate and they will think that this is horrible. Not realizing that we all have voices, we all have internal dialogues. We can all imagine the voices of our parents, and sisters and brothers, and people we've heard speaking on television and things like that. We can even sing songs inside our heads. But still, most people think that these voices are inside our heads. I work in an anxiety clinic, and we often have people who have intrusive thoughts. They will say they are thoughts, they won't say that they are voices, but it's quite a similar phenomenon. It is thoughts that come that you haven't invited in, you haven't thought of them consciously. All of us get thoughts when we get associations, but for people who have intrusive thoughts, they usually start thinking of grotesque things like stabbing their children with knives, suffocating their babies, killing animals, etc. These are quite normal thoughts. When people get to reply anonymously, they 80% admit to these kind of thoughts. And like many of the big therapists in OCD state, the rest are lying. We all have these things. So, voices don't necessarily have to be a problem. Many people feel it's good company, actually. It all depends on what you think they are. If you think voices are a sign that your brain has broken down, that you have an incurable brain disease, of course you're going to get extremely stressed. And that stress actually has a tendency to bring on more of those voices. It's exactly like thoughts. If I say, don't think about red rabbits, you're going to think about red rabbits a lot. If I say, yeah, it doesn't matter, if you think about red rabbits, just tell me, then people will think a lot less about them. So if you try to suppress a thought, or you try to suppress a voice because you're afraid of it, it's going to get worse. What they found out in Bergen was that people who have a better control over their auditory processes in their brain, of the auditory cortex, that can turn their attention outwards, are usually less bothered by their voices than people who have a very internal focus, who start to focus on the voices. And if you're very afraid of what these voices mean, if you're afraid they mean that you're crazy, of course you're going to focus on them in a slightly unhealthy way. Okay, that was the first for now. We're going to take more later.